Well, last week, many of those goods have already started flooding into Europe.
So as you see it now, this trade war is China versus the rest of the world.
Well, I'm not calling it a trade war, but I'm saying that China has escalated, and President Trump responded very courageously to that, and we are going to work on a solution with our trading partners.
If I could just, excuse me, Raquel, if I could just add to what the Secretary said. Many of you in the media clearly missed the art of the deal. You clearly failed to see what President Trump is doing here. You tried to say that the rest of the world would be moved closer to China when in fact we've seen the opposite effect. The entire world is calling the United States of America, not China, because they need our markets, they need our consumers, and they need this president in the Oval Office to talk to them. And that's exactly why more than 75 countries have called, because the United States of America is the best place in the world to do business. And as the president has shown great courage, as the Secretary has said, in choosing to retaliate against China even higher. Elena, go ahead.
Hi, thank you, Treasury Secretary Bassett. Can you explain more of the decision-making on what feels like a reversal here? I mean, just these went into effect less than 15 hours ago, these tariffs. Why the pause now? What led to that?
No, again, President Trump created maximum negotiating leverage for himself, and which tariffs went into effect 15 hours ago. The ones that we have lowered went into effect a week ago, they were announced a week ago, and we've just been overwhelmed by the response from mostly our allies who want to come and negotiate in good faith. So we are expecting them to come with their best deal. As I said a week ago today, don't retaliate, hold your ground, let's see what happens. And China, they kept escalating, and now they have 125% tariffs that will be effective immediately.
Mr. Secretary,
go ahead.
Mr. Secretary, thanks so much for doing this. The 90-day pause on the reciprocal tariffs, is that because of the whiplash that we've been seeing across the financial markets? How much was, what we saw in the stock markets, a part of this decision?
No, it's because because of the large number of inbounds. We've had more than 75 countries contact us, and I imagine after today there will be more. So it is just a processing problem. Each one of these solutions is going to be bespoke. It is going to take some time, and President Trump wants to be personally involved. So that's why we're getting the 90-day pause.
Mr. Secretary, there was a tweet that you and Secretary left in the Oval Office with the president talking about this. Can you talk about what that conversation was like and what you guys said to one another that was the decision?
Look, it's all the president's decision, and the president had a level in mind to raise the China tariffs, and then he had the 3-month, essentially the 3-month pause.
This is an ABC News special report.
Hi, I'm Diane Macedo. We're coming on the air because President Trump has announced a 90-day pause on tariffs against most nations while raising tariffs against China. The markets have jumped on the news right now. We're seeing the Dow up about 2,000 points. The president posted on social media saying, quote, "Based on the lack of respect that China has shown to the world markets, I'm hereby raising the tariff charge to China by the United States of America to 125% effective immediately. At some point, hopefully in the near future, China will realize that the days of ripping off the USA and other countries is no longer sustainable or acceptable." The president went on to say that based on the fact that more than 75 countries have reached out to the U.S. to negotiate, he is putting a 90-day pause on most other tariffs. I want to bring in our ABC senior political correspondent, Rachel Scott, at the White House, where we just heard from the press secretary and the Treasury Secretary, on this. Rachel, how are they saying this is going to work now?
Yeah, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, as well as the Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt, are speaking to reporters right now here at the White House, trying to explain how the administration is going forward on this. So just the headline here, the president was asked about whether or not he was going to do a 90-day pause just days ago by our own Mary Bruce. He said at this time it was not something that he is considering. Now the president is going forward with that 90-day pause For most of our trading partners, it will be at 10%. For everyone else but China. China, the tariffs are now rising to 125%. The White House is insisting that 75 countries have come to the table, have reached out to this administration and the White House to continue these negotiations. It is very notable that China really not a part of those discussions right now. You see this tit for tat between the United States and China as this trade war between us and one of our largest trading partners is now escalating. But the bottom line here, Diane, the president is pulling back on some of those retaliatory tariffs that he initially announced just days ago, Diane.
And I want to bring in Whit Johnson, who spent the morning on the New York Stock Exchange. Whit, this is at least partially the news that so many investors were hoping to hear.
This is exactly what people were asking for. The one thing that's sort of missing in all of this is the clarity and the specifics. Obviously, we have the 90-day pause. There's some time for investors to digest. But what's interesting with the 90-day is that's what basically people have been calling on the president. Heard from Bill Ackman, who's a billionaire, who's a longtime supporter of Donald Trump's, who came out warning about the effects of these tariffs. He put out in a statement on X earlier in the day calling for specifically a 90-day pause. We also saw Jamie Dimon with JP Morgan, who had been talking about the increased likelihood of a recession. So we see all of these people who President Trump knows very well, who'd been calling for this pause. We saw the markets reacting, hanging on every single word from the president, but this gives them time to figure out what's going to happen next. Now, one thing that we did see this morning, which I think for people from the outside looking in, it was a little bit confusing. Why did, after the tariffs were announced overnight, why did the markets kind of go up and down, up and down? And it seemed as if from some of the traders that I was talking to, they were suggesting that some of the concern had sort of been baked in the previous 4 days where we saw those massive declines. I mean, up to $6 trillion, in the S&P alone. And so they were waiting. And that's why you're seeing it going up and down. Every little piece of news, every little hint from the administration about a negotiation, maybe some optimism, people were jumping in or people were jumping out. But this was that thing that they had been waiting for. But one piece of caution here, based on what I'm being told, is that, look, it's not over yet. You still have this escalating trade war between the U.S. and China. That's going to have a massive ripple effect. And so what does that mean? We don't know, but still some at least temporary good news when it comes to investors.
And let's dig a little deeper into that ripple effect with our chief business correspondent, Rebecca Jarvis. Rebecca, 90-day pause on most of these tariffs on the one hand, increased tariffs 125% on China. What does that mean for consumers?
Well, first of all, it's a stunning reversal. Just a week ago, the President Trump dubbed it Liberation Day and rolled out all of these so-called reciprocal tariffs. And now there's a 90-day pause on the majority of them, except for on China. First of all, those sources I'm talking to on Wall Street have anticipated that a lot of this has been with the idea of isolating China. And you even heard from the Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, who's speaking right now, that early countries who have come and spoken to the United States, the likes of Vietnam, South Korea, India, Japan, countries that might have aligned themselves with China are going to be included in this 90-day pause. That said, China is still a very, very important trading partner with the United States. They export about $440 billion worth of goods here to the United States. A number of small businesses and big businesses rely on China, and it appears that things are continuing to escalate there with part of this directive, including that increased tariff on Chinese goods that are coming here to the United States. So when it comes to those items like clothes, shoes, toys, electronics, some furniture that are coming here from China, when we've been talking about these possible price increases, if the tariffs are to stay in effect, that is still on the table. Those price increases are still on the table, and anything that's coming from China, whether it's already left, happens to be in the water, on a ship in the water, they will still face at U.S. Customs those higher tariffs. And as we reported over and over again, generally speaking, what companies do is they pay that higher tariff, U.S. companies pay that higher tariff at the border as the goods come here and then pass it off to consumers.
All right, Rachel, Rebecca, Whit, thank you. And we will continue to watch closely. The market's now up a little more than 2,000 on the Dow, and we will continue to monitor action at the White House on this as well. Our coverage continues on ABC News Live and abcnews.com. And David Muir will be back tonight with the entire team of World News Tonight. I'm Diane Macedo in New York. Have a great day.
And Diane, thank you. We want to take you right back to the White House, where the Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent continues taking questions from reporters.
But I think having seen the maximum level that Donald Trump is willing to go to, President Trump has created this negotiating leverage.
Excuse me, everybody. Excuse me. The secretary is obviously a very busy man. As he has said, he's had more than 75 countries that the trade team has to respond to. I'd just like to end with this. For decades, Republicans and Democrats have said that these unfair trade practices are ripping off the American people, are ripping off our country, but nobody has ever done anything to address it. We finally have a president here at the White House who is playing the long game, who is doing what is right for the American worker and our industries here at home, and he has put together a fantastic team in Secretary Bessent, Secretary Lustnick, the entire trade team who will be focusing on negotiating these good deals to put the American workers first, and we're going to get to work to do that. Thank you.
What about the EU? What about the EU? They retaliated this morning. Why aren't they being treated like China?
What a stunning turnaround when we were just talking about not wanting to look at our 401ks. Right in the middle of our newscast, we get word that President Trump puts a pause on tariffs for 90 days, and the markets just surge. The Dow up 2,000 points. NASDAQ jumped 7%. You just heard from the Treasury Secretary there coming out of the White House. And as Caroline Levitt put it, this is what you call the art of the deal. Let's bring in our Rachel Scott from the White House and also our business correspondent, Alexis Christoforous, and Selena Wang, our senior White House correspondent, also in the mix. Rachel, let's start with you. You're there at the White House. Did you have any idea that this was going to come down so quickly and that the markets were going to react so quickly?
Yeah, no, Kira. I mean, look, talk about a stunning turnaround, whiplash, even for some Republicans on Capitol Hill who were trying to make sense of what the president's strategy was, what the end game was here. I mean, the president was asked just days ago by our own Mary Bruce whether or not he was considering this 90-day pause at all on any of these tariffs. And the president said at the time it was not something that he was even considering. So here we are now just days later, and the president making this stunning turnaround saying he is, in fact, now doing this 90-day pause on some tariffs. For most of our trading partners, it will be at a 10% level. Everyone except for China, essentially, which now rises to 125%. You have this tit for tat going between the United States and China, where the United States imposes tariffs and then China tacks on even more tariffs and the U.S. also responds. This is going back and forth. And while you hear from the administration and the Treasury Secretary as well as the press secretary saying that they are speaking to some 75 countries about negotiations on how to avert a long-term trade war, it's notable that they really have not mentioned China at all in any of these conversations. And so, look, the bottom line here, yes, this 90-day pause will help offset the price increases that many Americans were bracing for. But still, this country still has a lot of trade done with China. And so you can expect a lot of those goods to increase if these now stay in place.
Got it. All right, Alexis, I mean, so many questions for you. I guess, first of all the pressure from the billionaires. We know that the president of the United States loves rich and powerful men. Look, his whole life has been about making a lot of money and creating big business. So, you know, he puts out little clues today. In particular, this is a great time to buy. You know, you always see the president say things like that, very bold statements. And clearly, we probably all should have paid attention to that, because look what happened. So back to the beginning of my thought here, all these billionaires, Bill Ackman even suggested that the president should put forward a 90-day pause on these tariffs. Did the president at the end of the day listen to his billionaire friends, or was it the fact that he got so tough, countries responded, and like he said, and these are his words, everybody came kissing his ass?
Right. And the short answer is we just don't know. I mean, certainly President Trump is hearing from these CEOs and billionaires, many of them longtime backers of the Republican Party and have been very supportive of President Trump until very recently when these tariffs were announced and they were much more bold and aggressive than many had thought. And now we're hearing the odds of a recession rising. Every Wall Street bank on Wall Street has been raising the odds of a recession in the coming months. Is the president taking that into consideration? We don't know. But publicly, the Treasury Secretary just now said that they've been overwhelmed. That was his word, by the many countries who have come to the table, he said, to negotiate in good faith. And the press secretary saying this is the art of the deal. I guess we're seeing the art of the deal play out here in real time on Wall Street as well, because just as the response on Wall Street was so aggressive to the downside once these tariffs were announced, this 90-day pause, we're seeing an aggressive reaction to the upside, right? I mean, the Dow up more than 2,000 points. And I'm going to tell you, Kira, it's across the board. I was looking at the S&P and the NASDAQ, both up 5% on the S&P, 7% on the NASDAQ. The tech stocks that were beaten down so hard during the past few sessions because of their exposure to so many countries with these tariffs are leading the rise today, including stocks like Apple, Nike, and Home Depot. We've also got gold, silver, the dollar, oil, all of it rallying. But remember, we're not out of the woods. We've still got these tariffs on the table. They have been reduced. And of course, the big whopper, China, 125% against Chinese tariffs. And we know they're one of our largest trading partners. Still a lot to sort through. But the 90-day pause gives, I think, everyone, including corporate America, it buys them a little bit of time.
So what do you think, Rachel? Is this China versus the rest of the world right now?
Yeah, this is going to be really interesting to see essentially who blinks first, because this has turned into somewhat of a staring match. I will tell you, Kira, I'm eager to get back up to the Hill and ask Republicans about what they think and how the president should move forward, because a lot of Republicans privately were hoping for some sort of reprieve, some sort of breathing room. The big question here, though, what exactly is the president looking for in these negotiations with China? I mean, what exactly does he want to see? His team has not necessarily laid that out. I mean, we saw the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu here at the White House meeting with the president in the Oval Office, and he essentially said that he's going to be eliminating the trade deficit with the United States and that he was hoping that that serves as a model to other world leaders. I mean, is that appealing to China? That's the question that's on the table. And what does President Trump want to see, and who exactly is going to engage first? As I said, right now it's unclear if both of these sides are even talking past their public statements that they're putting out to the press.
All right, Selena, look, you lived in China. You covered that beat. You have had plenty of opportunities to be in the room with China's leader, specifically when he was here in the States with our president. What are your thoughts here? What do you think is going to happen now?
Yeah, Kira, I mean, this is a very risky game of chicken that both the U.S. and China are playing right now. I mean, you heard from Trump administration officials just there moments ago. They believe that they've got the upper hand here. They believe that China is going to have to bend because they rely on the big U.S. consumer market. But what I'm hearing from China experts is that China believes they have the upper hand. They're looking at the United States under Donald Trump right now. They believe that he is increasingly weakening the U.S. economy and that the U.S. is isolating itself as they are separating themselves from our closest allies and partners. I'm also hearing that Beijing has been preparing for this moment for years. They saw this coming, as you have seen this breakdown in relationships repeatedly, and they experienced the trade war during President Trump's first administration. That's, in fact, when I was based in China. So they have had years to prepare for this scenario, to shift some of their manufacturing and their exports. But all of that being said, China, they are digging their heels in, but this is also going to be extremely painful for their economy. It is true that it is going to be hard to find another buyer. I mean, the United States is a wealthy, gigantic consumer market. It's not going to be easy to just shift and find other buyers, for instance, to flood the market in Europe or elsewhere, as China has tense relations with other large, wealthy consumer markets. So this is going to be extremely painful for Beijing, but they certainly aren't going to back down. They've got domestic considerations. Xi Jinping doesn't want to look weak to the Chinese public in the face of Donald Trump, but the Chinese economy has already been suffering setbacks, and this is only going to make that worse. But at this moment, they are digging their heels in. I'm told that the Chinese are not looking to negotiate.
Wow. All right. Then this is just going to get even deeper. Jay O'Brien, let's take it to you up on the Hill. No doubt lawmakers responding.
Yeah, Kira, House Republicans were in a meeting of some of them while this news broke. They were actually being briefed by administration officials, but it looks like the administration officials had left before the president posted this news. And I asked House Republicans as they emerged, did you get any heads up from the White House about this, a decision that will directly impact your constituents? And they said, no, they did not. They viewed this as welcome news, by the way. Kira, they said that in their view, it was a testament to the president's negotiating ability. But one of the things I heard repeatedly from House Republicans after these tariffs, in large part, except for the ones on China, the baseline tariffs, were lifted, was this feeling of relief. At least two publicly admitted in ways that they had not before that they were worried about these tariffs, and they were worried about the impact these tariffs would have had on their constituents. And as Rachel noted earlier, we are very much not out of the woods yet because A, this is a pause, and B, there are those tariffs on China, and Republicans will no doubt focus on those as well with potential anxieties if those end up impacting their constituents. But it was notable that there were these Republicans who were much more willing now after this pause to admit, Kira, that yes, this is something that did worry them.
Rachel, do you think we're going to hear from the president?
Oh, we could, Kira. We could hear from the president later today. We know that there are a few things on his schedule, and he will be signing some executive orders later today. Of course, it's always up to President Trump about whether he wants to invite the press in, and obviously he will face several questions about what exactly changed his mind. Was this all a negotiating tactic from the very beginning? You have his Treasury Secretary speaking to reporters here at the White House saying that no one negotiates like President Trump, and so this does extend that sort of 90-day period, keeping the tariffs at that 10% level, that added 10% level for nearly all of our trading partners, except for China. But I can imagine that a lot of the focus is also going to be on these discussions with China and whether or not the president is engaged in negotiations or discussions there. And it's been notable to see China's statements, essentially calling this blackmail from the United States, saying that they're not going to bow down to this tit for tat that they continue to go in. And now it will be interesting to see whether China responds with even higher tariffs on the United States imports.
All right, Alexis, one more question. Does this mean no volatility for 90 days? Do I even ask that?
I wish. You know the answer to that one. No, I think it's volatility with a capital V as this market continues to make sense of it all, and also to react in real time, Kira, to the headlines that continually change coming out of the White House. So still, I think the messaging for investors, large and small, is, sit tight, buckle yourselves in, because it's still going to be a bumpy ride.
Okay. Rachel, Selena, Alexis, Jay, all of you, thank you so much. What a twist of events. As we just mentioned, this 90-day pause does not apply to China. Chinese leaders calling the tariffs bullying. They vowed to fight till the very end. And our next guest, well, he's an expert on U.S.-China relations and a senior fellow at the Hudson Institute here in D.C., Michael Sobolik. Thank you so much for being with us. You know, when we booked you previously to talk about what's happening within the markets and what's happening with China, we did not expect what just happened in the past, 20 minutes or so. So let me just, first of all, get your reaction to this stunning change of events on the markets.
So I think the main lesson here for anyone is that President Trump is interested in cutting trade deals where he can. And listen, it was probably a strategic mistake for the Chinese Communist Party to go toe-to-toe here. They're going to be in for some pain. But the reality is tariffs cut both ways. Tariffs on China will have an enormous impact on American consumers. Now, to a point, that's good because we've been too dependent for far too long on the Chinese Communist Party for our own economic security, and that's not safe. The way that the president is going about this could succeed, and I hope he succeeds in lessening America's dependence on China, but he's doing this initially by going after friends and allies. So listen, taking off those tariffs on the countries that are negotiating, that's good. We need to make sure that we keep them as friends and we keep that trust with them because we need our friends to take on Beijing.
Okay, two questions. So at the end of the day, is what we've been experiencing and what we're seeing now, is this all about China? and becoming less dependent on China? At the end of the day, is that what this is all about?
Everybody is asking that question. Nobody knows the answer. And frankly, that's a problem. Like, if this was about China the whole time, that should have been communicated much more clearly. You have two possibilities. Either this was about China the whole time, and this was a cloak and dagger operation to maximize leverage and to weather through some economic pain for a couple of days, or this was initially about addressing trade deficits writ large and a rejection of free trade. And that's a whole other can of worms. Like, those are two very different scenarios. The fact that we are even asking these questions and we are not completely sure is a problem.
So, but if the president had been transparent that this was all about China, would we be seeing what we're seeing right now? And that is, they say 75 countries or 75 leaders coming to the negotiating table.
I think that there are two things that are true at the same time with this. We need those people who are now the nations that are coming to negotiate. We need them if we want to hold China responsible economically, because as the president and his staff have said, and they're right about this, China can transship their goods through third-party countries to avoid our tariffs. That's not good. We need to find ways to go about that. But there's more than one tool in the toolbox than only penalizing right out of the gate our allies and our partners. So to answer your question, I don't know, because we're dealing with counterfactuals. But with China, again, this challenge is too big for the United States to go at it alone. Like, I applaud the president for going at the problem. I'm hoping that moving forward, this will be done together with our allies and partners all in sync.
I've got to ask you before I let you go, Michael, is China going to negotiate at some point soon? Do you think China will come, or are they just going to come hell or high water, stick to their guns here and battle it out?
So this is the interesting thing about tariffs. China's economy depends on exports. The United States economy does not. So when it comes to tariffs in and of themselves, we have a bit of an advantage because of how exposed they are. But the flip side is true, that U.S. consumers will be impacted by tariffs on China because of how reliant we are on China. So the question is, who is going to blink first? The president relieving tariffs on a lot of other countries will help tremendously. So we'll see.
All right. It all comes down to that game of chicken. Michael Sobolik from the Hudson Institute. So great to have your perspective. Really appreciate it, Michael.
Thank you so much.
Well, as we've mentioned, the uncertainty in the economy is making all of us think twice before making that next purchase right now. And that includes home improvement projects as well. We're getting into the nitty-gritty now with our Jacqueline Lee, who's been spending time across the country. She's now in Fort Washington, Pennsylvania, in the suburbs of Philly, looking into just that. So today, and I know with this, you probably were going to carry out your live shot in one way, but then we got this news of what's happening with regard to the stock market. Don't know if you've had a chance to follow up with the homeowners that you've been speaking to since the news broke, Jacqueline, but just give us an idea on where things stand right now, where you are, and hearing from homeowners.
Well, Kira, I mean, this is the heart of the issue here. It's this uncertainty. It's this whiplash that homeowners simply just, they're not able to plan. There's so much confusion over how things are going to play out because it seems like every hour of every day there is just a change in the headline, change in policy. So from the homeowners I spoke with, they are doing a big pullback in their spending. They're rethinking how they want to do things. But one thing remains the same, at least in the Philly suburbs and in areas that are around large cities, is that there is not much housing. A lot of the houses, especially in the Northeast, have been built years ago. And so homeowners tell me it's cheaper to stay put rather than paying the closing costs, realtor fees to sell their home, to buy a new home, to trade in their pandemic era mortgage rates for a higher one. It just doesn't make sense. So they say that they want to stay put, but they want to renovate instead. And so when we spoke with a remodeler earlier today, he was explaining that he was put on notice yesterday from his supplier when it comes to electric, like wiring and these breakers and whatnot, that they're expecting a rising cost effective immediately. Granted, given this new development with tariffs, that's all in question. But regardless, it doesn't change the fact that homeowners are questioning how they want to spend. Take a listen.
Originally, we were looking to hopefully do it, in the springtime now, maybe even early summer. But again, we just, with the job uncertainty and, things, we're just a little concerned to be taking a big chunk of money out of our savings to do a project like this. So we're hoping to still do it this year, but we're pushing it back to the end.
And waiting to see how things shake out.
Exactly.
And so what you just heard from Jen there is they're pushing off their project that would cost a lot of money to renovate their kitchen because they don't know what exactly is happening with tariffs. And so this just further proves the point, given that we're now seeing a pivot in policy, that's why homeowners are kind of taking a break and reassessing and pushing things a little bit later, because that's a lot of money to put up front to fix things when they don't know what's going to happen in the future. Kira.
All right, Jacqueline Lee, appreciate it. So they were there to hear one of the most famous merengue artists. Now at least 113 people have lost their lives, including singer Ruby Perez. It all happened when a roof collapsed at a nightclub in the Dominican Republic. You can see the pictures here, and the singer's body was pulled from the rubble overnight. We're also learning that former athletes and politicians were among the victims in this tragic accident. More than 150 people are in the hospital now with injuries, and crews are still searching for any survivors that they can find. Our Victor Akendo has more.
The devastating scenes from the Dominican Republic after a roof collapsed at a packed nightclub in Santo Domingo, killing at least 113 people and injuring more than 150. Now, investigators are looking at videos like these. This one recorded seconds before the horrific moment around 12:30 a.m. Tuesday. He's pointing at the roof, saying something fell. The singer performing on stage, also looking up. Then, the collapse. In another video, this group rushing away from the dance floor moments before the tragic accident. First responders raced to the scene to rescue any survivors. This man taken out on a stretcher alive. Drone footage putting the scope of the catastrophe on full display. Members of the performing band, including lead singer Ruby Perez, were among those killed. A local governor killed too, Nelsy Cruz, sister of former Seattle Mariners pitcher Nelson Cruz. Former Major League Baseball players Tony Blanco and World Series champion pitcher Octavio Dotel also dying in the incident. The New York Mets holding a moment of silence for their former player. And one of the owners of the nightclub posted a video, a message to the families impacted, saying in part, "There are no words to express the pain caused by this event. Everything we do now has a single purpose, to be worthy of your pain and to support you." Kira?
Victor, thank you. So it's known as one of the world's most notorious prisons, and it now houses the hundreds of mainly Venezuelan alleged gang members in the U.S. or from the U.S. that was deported in recent weeks. El Salvador CICOT, or the Terrorism Confinement Center, is a bleak, miserable place that the country's violent gang members call home. But locked away behind the same bars are many of those U.S. deportees who say that they were not supposed to be there at all. Our Matt Rivers actually has an inside look at the prison now amid the Trump administration's aggressive immigration crackdown.
As the family of a Maryland man, Kilmar Abrego Garcia, seen in this photo wrongfully deported by the Trump administration, waits to see if the Supreme Court will order his return, ABC News going inside the prison where he was sent. This is CICOT, the notorious Salvadoran mega prison, where the Trump administration has deported hundreds of alleged gang members, most Venezuelan.
So the authorities here in the prison would not let us into the building where those that have been deported from the United States are currently at. But right there, that building behind me, they're inside there.
Lo que está viendo acá es el día a día. But this cell block, says the prison director, is exactly the same. Prisoners shackled, run out of their cells for a bunk inspection. Lined up, shirts off, head on the man in front of them. Conditions are harsh. Lights on 24/7, 30 minutes of exercise per day, no visitors ever, not even allowed a book.
This is bleak, it's brutal, it's harsh, it is frankly difficult to see. But the government of El Salvador says that these people here are the worst of the worst. Now, ABC News has no way to independently verify each case here, whether they're all criminals, whether some are innocents just swept up in this wave of detention. But what is a fact is that the majority of these people here behind me will spend the rest of their lives in a cell block like this one.
It's unclear how long those deported from the U.S. will be here, but the Supreme Court ruled the Trump administration can keep deporting people here if the accused get due process, something Abrego Garcia's attorney says he was denied.
I have every expectation that the Supreme Court will rule quickly and will rule in our favor.
And so the conditions inside really are brutal. We saw at least 80 people in each cell sharing only 2 toilets between them. But the government of El Salvador says what happens there is warranted because what happens there has helped make this country safer over the last few years. Critics, of course, Kira, would call this inhumane.
Incredible access. Our Matt Rivers there in El Salvador. Thanks, Matt. Coming up, a grave mistake. A family in Pennsylvania outraged after a mishap. Yep, you saw what happened at their loved one's burial. We'll show you what happened.
The news never stops.
From Tampa, we are here tonight as Hurricane Milton has just made landfall.
The surge just keeps coming up.
Right on the border between Ukraine and Russia.
We're in artillery position about 2 miles away from Gaza.
And ABC News Live is right there everywhere.
We're not far from where this rally took place, so just stick with us here.
Traveling with the president to the U.S.-Mexico border.
Here in London today.
Off the coast of Gaza.
Downtown Tel Aviv, rockets or missiles coming in.
From the most devastating disaster in Hawaii. Some areas are still smoldering.
Wherever the story.
From the front lines,
the ruins of Rafah.
From the FBI.
Reporting from Capitol Hill.
In western Portugal. Outside of Mexico City.
In Iceland.
Let's go.
Here in France.
The eclipse across America.
Just stunning.
Unbelievable.
Streaming live to you.
Wherever the story is.
Wherever the story is.
We're going to take you there.
You're streaming
ABC News Live.
ABC News Live.
You're streaming ABC News Live.
ABC News Live. Streaming free everywhere because the news never stops.
Come on now. Who celebrates moms better than GMA?
Oh my gosh.
This is amazing.
Now GMA's ready to do it again.
Love it. Cannot wait for that.
So is there a mom in your life who deserves the most joyous surprise of a lifetime and getting breakfast in bed on GMA? Then scan this code or go to goodmorningamerica.com to find out how to enter one incredible mom for the greatest Mother's Day surprise. Hey, at GMA, we're celebrating 50 years of celebrating moms, and this Mother's Day will be the best surprise yet.
The Amateur in IMAX.
I want to find and kill the people who murdered my wife.
You're just a nerdy fellow, likes to work on computers.
But the CIA did nothing.
Take him off the board. Everyone has their breaking point. The Amateur constantly finds new ways to up the stakes.
Are you done? No, I want them all.
The Amateur, rated PG-13, only in theaters and IMAX Friday. Get tickets now.
I came with you to be part of something. The Empire cannot win.
Resistance is absurd.
We must stand together. We will be crushed.
You're right here, and you're ready to fight.
Welcome to the rebellion.
Andor Season 2, streaming April 22nd, only on Disney+.
I'm the doctor.
Doctor what?
Just the doctor.
All right then. I'm called the nurse.
Good team. You left Earth.
It's been 2 hours.
It was 6 months ago.
You need to get me home.
You don't need to rush, because
This is a time machine.
boom. I promised that I would keep you safe.
You can't promise.
I can. I will. I do.
Glad you're streaming with us. Trump's tariffs, still the big story of the day, as we have just learned that President Donald Trump is expected to host a cabinet meeting at the White House tomorrow, his first since announcing the pause on the sweeping tariffs for 90 days. The meeting coming as his top advisors have definitely butted heads, both privately and publicly, over the tariff policy.